I'm Doug Bopst, personal trainer, best-selling author, and entrepreneur, and I'm on a mission to help others become the best version of themselves. So I'd like to welcome you to the Adversity Advantage podcast, where we will help you use obstacles, failures, and setbacks to give you that edge needed for success. I'll be interviewing people from all walks of life on how they overcame trials and turned them into triumphs. So please, sit back, relax, and get ready to be absolutely blown away by some of the wisdom and stories you're about to hear. John Wolf, welcome to the podcast. Did I lose you?
I lost some audio there for a second. I don't know what happened, but it sounds to be that we are connected again. My apologies for the technical difficulties.
You're good. You're good. So John Wolf, welcome to the podcast. Still nothing?
No, it cut out again. If I use my AirPods, unfortunately, it seems that we're losing audio there. Can you hear me okay if I go?
Yeah. Is it quiet? Is it quiet where you are?
Relatively, yes.
Okay, cool. Then yeah, let's rock and roll. So John Wolf, welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here, Doug.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really inspired by your story. There's so many parallels between your journey, my journey, and I definitely want to dive so much into your story because fitness, it seemed in your transformation, was the catalyst for change. I know you struggled a lot with kind of anger growing up. I know you had some structure in your life, I guess, because you played sports, you were into martial arts, but then you found yourself into smoking pot, into meth, drinking excessively. So if you could take the listeners back, what was going on in your life in those moments, and then how fitness was that tool to really to really change your life, and now helping so many other people change theirs.
Yeah, definitely. You know, we touch bases, or you kind of highlight that those outcomes of being on the slippery slope and making progressively worse and worse choices at a pretty critical junction in my life. But the reality wasn't just that, I was falling into those things. I was in a apathetic state. And that was really triggered by a series of losses of life within my family. And so my grandmother passed away and had a series, just to give us some justification, or my, at that time, what I used as justification for my state of being was, she was just such a kind and loving person, but the way that she was exiting this world, it almost seemed unfairly a punishment because it was so arduous rather than being able to leave in peace, right? And so she had she had a, a third open heart surgery. She was trying to recover, didn't really go so well in the middle of the night, had an emergency surgery as a result. And I just thought, oh man, this is so drawn out. And it made me, and I think many other people, when we experience these trials, we question our beliefs. And it was a really tough time. And it just accelerated some of my exploratory nature in kind of the darker path of life, whether it was just partying more, or being willing to, if there was no attachment to some of the beliefs and meaning that I associated to life through the questions, or the anger I felt, that I didn't really have any fear about, you know, uh, not meeting those expectations or romanticized perspectives I had. So a year to the day after that, literally just after midnight, to be the anniversary of my grandmother's death, my grandfather passed away. And it was a really short time from when we found out something was wrong to when he had left. And then compounding that, things happen in threes, they say, right? And my uncle had a really rough time, uh, and he was not an older guy, but he had walked that path that we're talking for quite a long period in his life. He's a father, a husband, but also ran the streets and got into a lot of trouble. some of which I got to witness, and he and I relationship was strained. We bumped into each other and spent a whole night together just hanging out, partaking maybe in some of these substances that we were talking about to facilitate some really meaningful conversations, though we probably could have had those conversations otherwise too. But I think it made an opportunity for him to share with more vulnerability and honesty where he was, and he admitted to me he had intended to take his own life, which he had already tried to do. When that happened, when that really manifested, when he was successful in that, it just all fell apart, man. I
So he did end up taking his own life.
Yeah, man. And this is all within, 16 months from that first, from my grandmother's first, for the first death in the family. And I just I went into a tailspin, and if after that first death, I felt apathetic, man, after the third time, and feeling a sense of uh responsibility or a lack of ability to relay the message I tried so hard that night to give him, that he was loved, he was important, and we all needed him to be here. It was just so easy to go all the way to the bottom real fast. It was a lot of ecstasy, a lot of weed, but then it turned into, let's just try this meth stuff that showed up at the party, and within a week it was a really bad it was shown to be a really bad choice um to be so okay with introducing into my world at that time.
And
A year
how
and a half
old were you at that time?
Oh shoot, I think I was about 22.
Mm.
So I was pretty young. And then a year and a half later I was a 130-pound shell of myself, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And I was hurting pretty bad.
Yeah. Yeah, because I've heard you say that, a few of the things that really sparked your transformation where you had people like reaching out to you and saying that you essentially were like a shell of that person that they all knew, because it seemed like growing up you were that good kid, you were super disciplined and dedicated to martial arts, you played sports, you were active, but I think it just seemed you had this hole inside of you that um that was empty because of your parents splitting up. And then I think it seemed like you held on to that, and then you started experimenting with pot like later on in high school, and then it's just seemed these other events kind of poured gasoline on the fire that was already starting to burn with inside of you. And then you kind of hit, I think you kind of hit a moment like I heard you describe where you were on the side of the road drunk, right? And there was a person that the person like came over, and I don't know if you said you didn't remember, but talk about that situation. So somebody came and stopped you while you were just on the side of the road.
Oh man, you did some research, Doug. You got a lot of insight. So yeah, at one point in time, maybe I can transition from where we had left off to where you just
Yeah.
brought up. There was a pretty good gap there, and in all honesty, my fight with addiction didn't end when I overcame my meth addiction.
Mhm.
So I had taken quite a while to kind of trigger this transition when I was really a 130-pound shell of myself as a meth addict.
Yeah.
There was a trigger of saying like, hey, thankfully, I was hiding from my loved ones, mainly my mother, who I felt very accountable to. I was raised by a single mom, as you said. Growing up, I had some emotional issues due to being a child of divorce, and I think a lot of kids growing up in that situation, they assert themselves as partially responsible or fully responsible potentially, or have a lot of questions or concerns about themselves or their value as a result. But I was really lucky. I always knew I was loved, and I want to just preface that I don't discount that. That was a big part of the strength I was able to draw from, because I didn't go through a program and create a new network of support. I was able to plug back into the love and support of my family, and I'm really grateful for that. So I basically sat on the table, and after not really hiding from her for a year, and said, "Hey, mom, I know you know I've been avoiding you. I know you know I'm not well, but you've given me the space to work on myself, and I want to let you know from today moving forward, it might be a tough journey, but I'm gonna fix this. You don't have to worry anymore." And so I did over time, kind of beat that problem, right? The meth problem, but the addictive issues didn't stop there, as you said.
So
I
what did that? So sorry, I mean, just so what did that look like? Did you end up going to like rehab? Did you end up going to meetings? Did you end up just calling somebody? Did you end up just turning to another, like a healthy addiction? Like, how did you kind of navigate that?
Yeah, actually, you hit the nail on the head about, I didn't go through any rehab programs, but I did basically have to kind of reflect, right? You had talked about my childhood. I kind of hinted about, even though, you know, I had issues with how I grew up, some of the things I had that were great gifts, I was able to attach a lot of value to and a lot of my identity to, feeling accepted and loved, even in this time where I was really, really in a bad state. And then in addition to that, you mentioned my background in martial art, and I didn't really play organized sports so much, but I hung out with a lot of jocks and got to play with them on, the unofficial games of football, turkey ball, on Thanksgiving Day and things like that, and was always able to hold my own, but mainly because of the physical foundation I set in martial art when I was really young. And it wasn't really just a physical foundation, it was kind of a framework for self improvement that I held myself accountable to when I was young. And that facilitated me being the good kid that we were talking about, achieving a lot, but also um, feeling at this point in my life that what I really needed was to reassert that practice, the adoption of kind of the bylaws of the dojo, we recited these beliefs when we opened and closed every class, and I was able to ascend within a well-defined system, and become a teacher of other people. And I realized, okay, wait, I need to revisit the physical, mental, emotional discipline that I had in martial art. And so I sought that out. And it was through fitness. That's kind of where we had talked about before, was that it was really my rehab was through the constant exploration of what fitness was at this state in my life. It went through some old school bodybuilding stuff that I used to do in the garage when I was a teenager with the cement weights that were
Oh
leaking
yeah.
because my uncle had left them there from like 20 years ago. Did you have those in your garage too?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't have them in my garage. I never worked out formally as a kid. I mean, I didn't start working out until I was incarcerated when I was 21, but I do know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the old cement plastic weights,
Yeah.
and so I remember being in my garage doing that when I was young. So I explored that. I explored a conventional fitness certification. I thought it was really great information, but went through a practical, and it was taught by a bodybuilder I recognized from when I used to read bodybuilding magazines. And I realized he was in a lot of pain just going through the practical presentation he was giving, and he was still a monster. He was very strong, but he was strong with that caveat that how much could he apply that strength, because he was in pain. And then I realized I just wanted to do a bunch of research. So this was before the internet really, really took off, and there were some pretty interesting cats that were doing things. One of them was a gentleman by the name of Pavel Satsulin, and
Mm.
he had written some really awesome articles in a magazine called Muscle Media 2000. I really just loved his writing style and the information, the practical nature of what he provided in those articles. So I dove in headfirst. And another gentleman I found through the internet, had more of a martial arts kind of spin on a movement system, Scott Sonnen, and found some of the videos. They were really grainy videos, VHS type of stuff back then, right? And found stuff where he was moving around, and I was like, man, that reminds me of when I was young doing martial art, but on a different level. And so I kind of went down those two parallel paths and just poured myself into those two different curricula in 2003, got certified within a month for both. And so I was swinging clubs and kettlebells and doing a whole bunch of ground-based movement, doing like what would be considered very weird at that time and for many years to come. And now probably a lot less weird in terms of what we see out in the fitness realm. But going through that process and practice, going down those rabbit holes, really kind of was my rehab.
Right. Yeah, and I definitely want to get into how fitness can be the catalyst for change from specifically things like addiction, because you, myself, and so many others, that has been a huge foundation for that. But before we do, I'd like to kind of finish the trajectory of your story, because I know like the bad behavior didn't just stop there. I think you got yourself clean for a little while, and you dove into fitness and back into martial arts, and that was kind of the early 2000s. But I think you hit another rock bottom. I think it was 2005, 2006, where you kind of were drinking a lot. So what was going on? Like, what happened? So like, if you could walk the audience through, like, what was the transition? Like, did something trigger you to go back down that depths of addiction? Like, what was going on there?
Yeah, I had tried to figure out what I wanted to do in life at that point in time. And to be honest, I was never really fully out.
Hmm.
I funded my education, kind of participating in street culture. If we want to leave it vague that way, I'll just go ahead and say it that in that way. And so I was never really out because the participation was normalized to a great degree. And so at that point in time, uh, you know, making uh, making that scene really part of my life meant that it was a very slippery slope, what level I participated in or how it escalated. So, I was still in my mid 20s and I was seeking, what it was I wanted to do. I got into uh, like real estate and finance, and it was the boom. People were celebrating closing real estate deals and funding loans, and it was a great education about this industry. But at the same time, a lot of people had a lot of money floating around and using it frivolously, and I liked participating in going out and drinking, and then going out and drinking ended up being using some cocaine. And then, wow, this is a really familiar path that I'm on. And so I remember again, there's another parallel. A friend hit me up and say, hey, if you stop, we'll all stop. I'm like, well, I don't think I have that much influence over what everybody's doing. And he said, no, I swear, if you stop, if you really set a tone for what it is that we you know what you'll do, like most of us will stop. So it was a really eye-opening conversation, and I felt like, okay, well, let's test that theory out. And realized to some degree it was true, right? And because I did make a determination to revisit the path of personal improvement, parallel path out of this new hole. But it did also involve this story about blacking out and parking on the side of a freeway. That was kind of the what happened right before this conversation with a friend. And I was like, man, this is just really, I'm really never had this type of situation before. Pretty sure I got roofied. Whether I did or didn't really didn't matter. It was a really bad position to put myself in, or anybody else. Thank God nobody else was hurt, but I had gone out drinking in a neighboring town, tried to drive home. I don't remember trying to drive home. I was completely blacked out. And then the next thing I remember was being on the side of a freeway. A car was kind of parked at an angle with the line of the freeway. It was kind of just the corner of the bumper was sticking out, and I'm on all fours, and the world's spinning, and I'm puking, and somebody's walking towards me, saying, "Hey, man, you can't be out here." And I had no idea where I was, much less who was talking to me. And and he's like, "Man, you can't be out here like this. You're gonna get busted," you know. And I was thinking, in retrospect, I could have got ran over. I've known a lot of people. I've heard stories of people wandering in the highway in the middle of the night. It's a really foggy area, and getting hit by cars, much less, of course, potentially getting incarcerated. And so this person put me in their van. I remember it was a van, and I was going in and out of consciousness, and I didn't know where he was going, but he took it upon himself to get me home that night. And I told him upon dropping me off, like, "Man, I don't know who you are." I still couldn't see straight. I could barely stumble to the house and open the door, right? And so, um, telling him like how grateful I was, and I wanted to honor him and his family by taking them out. I don't even know how well I articulated that. And then and I, to this day, I never heard from that person, even though I tried to give him my contact information. He knew where I lived, but I just feel like that was an angel, you know, that kind of visited me that night. Because when I found out where my car was, he was going in a completely different direction. I missed my exit. I wasn't going the right way, and he was going nowhere near where he ended up taking me. And so I was really grateful for that. Had this conversation with a friend, dove head first back into fitness, got out of the industry in 2008, real estate industry, which was, it wasn't the real estate industry's fault. It was just created an environment where my predispositions were shined a light on, right, and made it really easy to access things that I had a weakness for.
Wow.
And that's when I started my fitness business.
Wow. That's amazing, man. And you're right. Like sometimes we have these unexpected heroes that show up into our life and it's just for a minute, right? And it's when we kind of aren't expecting it, but we need it the most. And they come in and something miraculous happens and then it changes our life forever. And that's kind of what happened with this unexpected person who kind of picks you up from the side of the road and it just starts talking to you on the way home. And then that becomes the bridge for you to stop drinking and destroying your life and then getting back into the place that I think all along you knew you were meant to be in, which is the fitness space, because you kind of always came back to the health and wellness martial arts space. Like you grew up on that, then you came back to it after the meth addiction, and then you stopped working out for a while, and then you got back into drinking and blowing coke, and then you stopped doing that, and then you found your way back into the fitness industry. So how did you start to build enough of a name for yourself to be able to partner with the company and start working with a company like Onnit, which is this massive conglomerate fitness company that's now recently been sold? It's was owned and started by Aubrey Marcus. How did that happen?
Man, it didn't make any sense, the path. At the time I was on it, uh, realistically, in 2008, I started my fitness business officially. I was kind of pulling double duties, uh, still working in finance, and then starting a fitness business just at a Gold's Gym. I was kind of the weird, crazy trainer doing kettlebell swings and club swinging and a whole bunch of gymnastics inspired drills out in the corner off of this power rack that nobody used, right? And and so I was trying to figure out how all those practices I really loved intersected. And because at the time, a lot of people would adopt a particular physical practice, right? Um, I am a fill in the blank power lifter, bodybuilder, athlete, yoga practitioner, group X instructor, like they're more fast beats and fast paced movements, whatever people, they had their fix that they preferred from a fitness perspective. And that's what they really stuck to as an identity. But I wanted to figure out how to amalgamate a lot of these things I liked picking things up that were really heavy. uh, uh, One of the more impactful programs I went through when I was overcoming my initial meth addiction, built up my body, was a really simplified strength program by Pavel called Power to the People. It was awesome. It was just, you're lifting heavy every day, which doesn't seem very intuitive for most people, but it was a really easy to follow, powerful program. And then I got into kettlebells and club swinging. I saw an opportunity to meld a lot of those things together with the ground-based movement and mobility practices. And it was like, well, I don't feel like I have to choose one or the other. I really want to figure out how they can synergistically be applied. And so that was kind of my mission. And I didn't really know it was for a long time, because I got associated with one organization and I went really deep with it. But upon leaving that organization and kind of being, it's tough when you leave an organization. You kind of might experience the opposite of the fraternity that you have felt when you were there. Sometimes people, when you leave, you become the enemy, right? And I let the leader of that organization know, hey, I'm leaving, but I'm not shrinking and stopping. I'm going to continue this path, and I'm going to incorporate the information and the experiences that I've had here. And I'm really thankful for them. Hopefully they'll only benefit you as I continue to proliferate like message, right? And so a similar message. And so that was kind of what I did. I started inviting a whole bunch of different uh, thought leaders to my little gym in Salinas, California. And what was initially clubs and kettlebells and ground-based movement and mobility started incorporating, say like sandbag training from Josh Hankin, or animal flow from Mike Fitch. And, some of my mentors were the team from GMB Fitness, Ryan Hurst and Gajarlo Ilano. And they were longtime friends and mentors. And it was the goal to not just integrate a few things, but integrate and gain a perspective of how all things have a common thread. That just got me, because of where we were in social media as well, having a coach that was kind of had a knack for promoting and putting out video. It got us noticed, and we were doing things and integrating more things, having an integrative philosophy in a way that I think most of the people in the industry really had never seen at that level, that many things and done well, it together synergistically. And that's what Onnit really noticed. They wanted someone to create an education framework using a lot of the tools that they had here, which happened to be a lot of the tools we used in our studio already, and and be the leader of the culture of our gym, the integration of the education framework within our on-site gym, which is just right down the hall here
Mm.
at our headquarters. And so it happened to be that someone I worked with in the past to produce a DVD had preceded my current role here at Onnit, as Onnit acquired his unconventional fitness magazine called My Mad Methods, and it got rebranded as the Onnit Academy. And so when they asked him who the right guy for the job was, I'm really grateful. He said, "This is your guy." And I interviewed, a very unconventional interview with Aubrey Marcus, where we may have talked about psychedelics, and that was one of the things that I didn't mention in my overcoming of addiction. It isn't something that I always mention, but uh, part of what I had realized during a very intense recreational mushroom trip was that I was able to see how clearly destructive some of my habits were. And it was kind of like an ego death and rebirth in the shower. I found myself alone in the shower, and and realized, like, okay, I'm gonna curl up in this ball, and then I'm gonna sprout up and overcome a lot of this stuff. And that kind of honest uh, sharing with Aubrey was part of my interview.
Yeah.
So it was a really interesting experience and a very unconventional path. To be honest, I spent more of that time broke and very purpose driven, building a team of people I think are really talented coaches that are all doing really cool things now with their careers. But it it wouldn't have been obvious that the path was going to lead me to where I now am,
Mm.
you know, and receive all the blessings I have here at Onnit.
Wow. Yeah, you said a lot there that I definitely kind of want to unpack a little bit. And one of the things you just said more recently was how open and honest you were with Aubrey in that interview process. And, just for people listening to this, like the more open you are and the more you're yourself and honest and you're able to put everything out on the line, like there's so much meaning and power in that, right? Because when you put everything out on the line and you're open and honest and you're your truest self, then like what's meant to happen will happen, and you can go to sleep at night and be thankful and happy knowing that you stayed true to who you were at your core throughout that process. And when you open up and you're real and you're raw, it gives that other person on the other side an opportunity to say, you know what, I've been there too, which it seemed like you and Aubrey had that connection, because I know Aubrey's obviously been through a lot of stuff in his life as well, and how psychedelics were um were something that has helped shift him into more of that healing process. So I want to go back and kind of double click into Onnit a little bit, if you will, because maybe some people listening to this, maybe they recognize Aubrey or they've heard of Onnit, but maybe they're not as familiar as others of what it actually is. Because I do know that Onnit is, I think in my understanding, it's obviously a fitness company, but you guys also explore like non-traditional, unconventional ways of fitness, and you're more into like human optimization. So if you could just, in a few minutes, like walk the listeners through like what exactly Onnit is and why it's different from other fitness companies.
Yeah, definitely. So you'd mentioned earlier on it's kind of the brainchild, right, of Aubrey Marcus, our founder.
Right.
And Aubrey is a philosophy major. He is a psychonaut, right, and he has is an explorer of many things, right. A lot of what he brought together is a result of his unique experiences and interests through his life. And what Onnit has is as the intention of Onnit as it fulfills its mission is, as you mentioned, helping facilitate total human optimization, right? And what is total human optimization? I think a lot of times we understand that we are physical beings, right? That we have an aspect of our mental aspect, physical, emotional, and spiritual. So all those pillars have to align to be optimal, right? Like alignment, right? We can talk about that. And all those aspects of ourselves have to funnel through our beliefs to create an optimal outcome. And Onnit, uh, if we were to go through all the years of evolution of the brand, it started potentially realistically as a supplement company where we focused on providing supplements. Primarily our biggest flagship product is a nootropic, which is a cognitive enhancement supplement called Alpha Brain, helping you function kind of in everyday life. And it's analog, which is New Mood, which is helps you calm down. So one to help you lift your raise your function, and one to help you down regulate, to kind of unplug and de-stress from the pressure of performance all day. But we've if that's kind of like the two ends of the spectrum, that's kind of how everything within Onnit works, right? It's not just drive hard, it's finding balance. And so a lot of what happened is Aubrey tried to you know bring together a lot of these disparate modalities that he found beneficial. We got into from supplements to functional foods to fitness equipment. Okay, there's not too many supplement companies that are offering fitness equipment. And then what type of fitness equipment did he bring into the fold? Kettlebells, clubs, and maces. What clubs and maces? What is this weird stuff? Well, he's a philosophy major. He was studying the historic relevance of some of these fitness practices and he realized that he wanted to bring that into the modern era. Uh, there were already some other people doing it, so it wasn't as if there wasn't some precedent there. But Onnit, as you said, is a really powerful brand, and he wanted to use the brand to bring some of these what we consider esoteric practices to light. And so that's really what we've done is try to curate a lot of different methods, a lot of different tools, a lot of different practices that people can apply in their everyday life. And if you want to simplify, what total human optimization is or feels like, is kind of when you are in flow state. And I think that's a lot of, when you're on it, that's kind of like a statement, like I was on it. And that's really where the name of the brand came from with him and Bodie Miller. Like if he was playing basketball, which Aubrey has a great affinity and is a great basketball athlete, if he was really on his game, he was on it. If Bodie Miller was doing a downhill and he had a great run, he was on it. And if you could be like writing a book or writing an article or in an interview, in a conversation, and it was just flowing, you're on it, right? And so all the tools and resources are meant to facilitate you being on it in that way.
Mm, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I remember when the company kind of first started, and it started out as that supplement company, and then I've just seen it evolve through the years. And I remember when they came out with like the clubs and the maces, and I didn't know who made them, and I was like, wow, Onnit's making fitness equipment now. And because I was working as a trainer in a big box gym, and you pretty much just saw like Life Fitness and like Cybex and just the standard gym equipment. You weren't really seeing a lot of these unconventional pieces of fitness equipment, and so it's been awesome to see the whole brand kind of evolve. And I know that you've played a massive role in that. You're kind of they call you the CFO, and it's not chief financial officer. You're the chief fitness officer, where essentially you oversee creating and all the fitness side of things with Onnit, the training, the certifications, the program design, and everything that goes along with that. So I want to stay on the human optimization topic, and I do want to get into another way that people may have heard of Onnit is through Joe Rogan. I want to talk about what he's like in the gym, but like, so let's talk human optimization. Like, to you, like what does that look like? I know you said it make you feel on it, but what kind of things can people do if they're really trying to optimize their health?
You know, for for me, and I think you and I had kind of alluded to this uh, in our pre-game here. We just kind of
Yeah.
like, hey, what's up, Doug? And I think we got into some of this preemptive of when we got to hit record. But I'd like to revisit it, and to me, human optimization is no more complicated than you. Uh, I have a language coach, Mark England, and he talks about the difference between a goal and a dream, right? And or a goal and a wish, and the fact that you can define the goal and it's written somewhere makes it tangible and real. So if we can define goals for ourselves and we can move towards them, we're moving towards a more optimal version of ourselves that we're choosing, right? And but the path, say if a lot of us don't feel we are grounded enough to really even know, sometimes as you and I had shared in our darker times, it's really hard to be mentally, emotionally, spiritually aware enough to kind of align those aspects of ourselves. So sometimes it's really just taking the first step. And I think most people realize that they could do better for themselves and their physical form, their body, by having a good physical practice, a good exercise regimen, a good uh, develop in the case of how we teach, we provide our framework is developing a better and more healthy relationship with our body by having meaningful conversation with it on a daily basis. As usually for us, it's kind of like we're mapping our body. We are checking in, having a dialogue with that says, okay, how is this part of my body feeling? And oh wait, it's not feeling well. Instead of yelling at it and telling it, hey, we get with the program. you realize like, oh, why doesn't that part of my body feel well? Maybe I'm the tyrant that has been whipping the horse, and now it just can't keep up with the demands. Maybe I need to give it a different stimulus, right? And so, how do I create a framework of having a good, healthy dialogue with my body, giving my body the love and respect it deserves so it can heal and function well? And how does that create a parallel in everyday life that lets me enrich my my world with fruitful relationships, right? If I can I start with me and then have that framework pour out from me into the world. And if I can do that, from our education framework on the fitness side, that's kind of where we start. And but there's so many paths in, right? For some people that listen to Aubrey's podcast, they might find that they don't have the will to even start in the physical realm. Maybe they go through and they listen to some of the information, and this is not for everyone either, right? So like I find the physical practice that I espouse, I feel really comfortable like bringing that to whoever is interested and ready to jump in that. But people who listen to Aubrey, they might find that their path is more through their psychological needs, and maybe there's so much research going on with the PTSD research using psilocybin, right? Maybe that's where they seek an opportunity to make a big breakthrough. Or some other people may find a spiritual practice, right? That they need to adopt. For me, because of who I am, my role within the organization, I obviously am going to lean towards the path that I know I can facilitate and create the best outcomes. But there's so many different ways in, and I just want to make sure anybody listening knows, as long as you're moving towards a better understanding of a more centered version of you, like seeking the right information, finding the things that resonate with you, and making conscious decisions to move towards that, even if it's slowly, then you're on the total human optimization
Mm.
path.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I like how you touched on the fact that you kind of have to do what works for you. And I talk about this a lot because, and I'm sure you get asked this question too as a trainer, where people are like, John, like, what's the best workout program? Like, how am I going to lose the most weight, or how am I going to feel my best, or how am I going to put on the most muscle? And sure, you can give generic recommendations based on what that's worked for you and other clients that have gone on that certain path. But the workout plan that's going to work most for that person is the one that they're actually going to stick to consistently, right? So I like how you touched on that, whether they listen to Aubrey's podcast, they want to go down that more psychological route, and maybe that's the bridge to them maybe finding meaning in their life, then they build confidence to pursue the physical activity side of things. Or if they want to go the physical route, get started on a workout program, and then maybe that helps them build confidence to go the psychological route. Like, it's all intertwined, right? And I want to go back to goal setting, because you touched on it, and I think it's really important. And I think a lot of people, they fall short on this. And I think there's some things that they probably could do a better job of that maybe aren't as hard as they think, in order to make sure that they can achieve the goals that they want. So what advice do you have for somebody that's coming to you and they're looking to achieve a goal, whether it's a fitness transformation, maybe it's they're trying to change their mindset, change the way they eat? Like, what are some things that you make sure are staples in that routine or in your dialogue with them to help them do that?
I think you hit the nail on the head there. The dialogue. And
Mm.
it's not even my dialogue with them, it's their perpetual dialogue with anybody who they're speaking to, and primarily within their own head.
Right.
And in that dialogue shapes our reality. And I think most of us, I'm going out on a limb to say just my perspective, most of us don't realize what that dialogue is, or we're not taking any control over the language we're using, we don't understand oftentimes how self-defeating the way we frame our statements in our own mind can be. And then we continue to perpetuate that in reality around us, and it becomes even more real and heavy. Uh, that I had mentioned, and it's funny, you know, we're talking about this dialogue, and for me, uh, we had talked about my upbringing and my reality growing up. I'm really empathic, so I think I had an innate understanding of a lot of this, but I didn't have the ability to teach it effectively. In our fitness education framework, we provide kind of pillar principles that allow people to apply more critical thinking, not critical in negative way, but like really seeking truth in the sense that there is truth in people's reality and how to navigate those things. But what I found more recently, and I mentioned my friend Mark England and his body of work, he has something called the core language upgrade. And so in this conversation with you, I would have a really hard time relaying how powerful some of the tools are in the framework because it's such a simplified perspective he provides as an educator of types of language that he would say like our architect language, like manifesting a willful positive outcome that you for your choice, or conflict language, which is essentially taking away your own personal power, and how that's perpetuated internally and externally, but it's manifested from you, right? And how those that language, the pattern of behavior you take on with your language, really does frame every experience we have. So I would say one of the things I really suggest is investing in and exploring the impact of language, because my friend Mark would say that you know words are essentially spells. They have really powerful meaning that we kind of take for granted, and it would be a much longer conversation around this topic for me to do it any justice, but I would highly suggest anybody here look into that type of body of work. You know, there's a lot of different areas of study there. His body of work I just find really uh, practical, actionable, and also very accessible. You
Mhm.
know.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think the way we talk to ourselves um, can dictate whether we have success in our life or whether or we're miserable, right? Because if you tell yourself you suck or you're never going to achieve this or you're weak and all these things, and you're not envisioning like something positive happening in your life on a consistent basis, you're going to be miserable as a human being, right? But if you're able to flip the switch and talk to yourself in a more optimistic way and just see the good in situations despite how bad they are, and being able to stay positive, have faith, just be determined to achieve whatever goal that is, like you will eventually win in life. And maybe you won't win in the sense where you're going to have success with everything you try, but you're going to win because you're going to have some successes. And the times that you don't achieve it, you're going to at least be confident in yourself and pat yourself on the back for giving it your best, and then taking the lessons learned from those failures and applying it to have success in the future. So along the self-talk, I just want to get like your perspective on this, because I'm sure you deal with this a lot, where people they start a program, right? Let's just say they start a 12-week transformation program, where they want to lose 50 pounds in a year, and everything's going good maybe for a month. The scale is moving, that their clothes are fitting differently, they're feeling more positive, but then after that first month something happens and they hit a plateau.
Mhm.
Like, what do you tell somebody, or what would you tell yourself in that moment to keep you going, so that you wouldn't just go down in this downward spiral and beat yourself up and perhaps even eventually quit?
Yeah, I remember this conversation I had with a client in my old studio in Salinas, and this has become a story I tell pretty often, and then I apply it in real time. and it always has the same effect, right? It it proves how distractible we are from our goals when it seems like we're unfairly being presented with challenges that get us off course, right? And so, well, what is that? Well, it could be the fact that I was at a 3 pound a week weight loss, and all of a sudden it's 2 pounds, and that's framing it as a negative or a failure this week. But the reality is it's an unsustainable perspective we have, and that we have to accept that there's going to be a lot of uh, detours or distractions on the path to realizing our goal, especially if it's a big, hairy, audacious goal, right? And for a lot of people, if they are in a state that they have a lot of weight to lose, chances are they've been progressively moving away from their optimal state that they want to get to for a long time. It's going to be a long journey. And so I remember being in the studio, and it was just one on one. A lot of times, members would hang out and we would just talk about life or where they were. And and you know, this friend of mine was imploring how hard it was to stay motivated, because not only was it that the progress had kind of plateaued for a little while, but that life was providing a whole bunch of external challenges to overcome. And and that and sharing how important it was for him to reach this goal. So, well, okay, let's just use, in our space here, let's just play a game and see if it helps frame this perspective, and so I've used this recently with just a couple of our coaches from a professional development standpoint as well. And I say, hey, that door on the other side of this room represents your goal, right? And no matter what happens between now and the next 5 minutes, your goal is to reach that door, right? And so they're like, okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, that's my goal. And the door is right there. Look, is this a clear path to my goal? And the very first thing I do as soon as I say that is I walk and I stand right in front of them. And so I present an immediate obstacle. And they have to determine, is this obstacle one that I have to knock over or circumvent around or climb over, whatever it is, right? Knock down, climb over, or move around. And as they move, I move with them, right? And if they physically engage me, I provide equal resistance. And if they have a wrestling background, I might be able to play a little bit there too, right? And then I might let them pass there, but then I'll shove them from their side, like, and they get angry, And I was like, no, don't look at me. I'm irrelevant. I'm just an obstacle. Your goal is over there. And I think so many times this obviously this game continues, and and uh and we make it fun, obviously, but at this, and usually it devolves, especially if it's a guy, into some type of wrestling match, which is just fun. But and then of course they win,
Yeah.
after plenty of resistance that's provided. But in any case, this 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 is the reality most of us live in, is we start getting distracted and play into the trap of focusing on the distractions, focusing on the challenges that we have to overcome, and lose focus on the goal, right? And the goal becomes secondary to living in this moment of frustration. And and I know that it's impossible to not acknowledge what we're facing, but we have to acknowledge what we're facing in a bigger vision of what we're trying to achieve. And and the fact of the matter is, everything on the path is just makes the story that much more enriching when we get to the end. And nobody reads a book about a hero that doesn't have to overcome anything, right? And you talked about Rogan, and in one of the famous motivational videos we have of him is, be the hero of your own story. And you know to be a hero, you have to overcome you have to overcome a nemesis, a big challenge, whether that's in the form of a monster or a mountain, whatever the case it is.
Yeah. And you got to choose your suck, right? Like you're in that room and the door, the open door is kind of your goal to get out, right? And that's like the end, right? Is achieving whatever it is you wanted to. And like you mentioned, you stand in front of your client, and what happens a lot is we stand in front of ourselves. We're our own worst enemy at times with the way we talk to ourselves, the people we surround ourselves with, our habits, the choices we make, our routines, like everything else. And you have a choice, right? Like just using you as that obstacle as an example, like you can be that person that just fights to move you out of the way and tries to shift around and get around you or do whatever to get to that door, and just maybe you don't make it, right? Maybe you just collapse and you gave it your all. You can be that person and be proud of yourself for giving it your all, and knowing that you at least gave it a good shot. Or you can be that person that doesn't try, just sits on the ground and gives up. And then over time, that regret of not chasing after that goal is going to burn a lot more than the fact that you gave it your all and then collapsed in the process of doing so, right? And I think people, you have a choice, and they both suck, right? One takes a lot of hard work, right? Because you're having to exert all this energy, all this time, all these emotions to get there. And the other one sucks because you're pretty much living in shame and regret of not doing it, not believing in yourself. I want to shift back to Rogan, because I feel like he'd be somebody, if you said that to him, you probably have a hard time stopping that guy from getting to the door, right? Because he seems like he's in phenomenal shape. So what's it like training a guy like Joe Rogan?
Well, first and foremost, I wouldn't play that game with him because he'd spin me back, kick me into another dimension, right? Um, but and just to your note, really quick, we just to acknowledge what you had said. If you fail on the path and you learn, you can still get up and
Yeah,
choose to do it again. Like, don't stop just because you failed once or 20 or 1,000 times. You just fail forward, they say,
yeah,
like it's just as long as you keep making progress, you'll fail and then you'll fail again and you fail again, and you'll be exhausted. And then you'll sit there and reflect and you'll learn. But you don't learn when you quit, or you learn to quit. That's kind of
right,
what it is, right? So it doesn't mean that it's going to be any easier, but I think you hit the nail on the head, is shame and regret. Those are things that are really hard to shake, and I've lived with plenty of both. Um, but with Rogan, man, it's really it's a trip, because the first week I worked at Onnit, I moved here to Austin from California, and everybody was like, "Hey, Rogan's going to be in town this week," and I was like, "Okay, cool." I barely sat in my desk at all, but everybody was cleaning their desks and was like, "Oh, okay, we just got to make sure that everything looks good." It put our best foot forward, and I was like, "Okay, cool," but everybody seemed a little nervous, because it's a big deal. Joe's a big deal, and
right.
and this was 7 years ago. You know, oh my God, now, you know, we talked about people's entry point. If it was Aubrey's, you know, introducing potentially the psychonaut path, which Joe talks about too. But when people hear Joe's message and listen to Joe speak, they come in here ready to go. And when he's here, one of the things that's important for me is that we have the opportunity to just be of service to him. And
Right.
he's out there doing something that's changing a lot of people's lives, and we receive a lot of those people. And so for me, the first time I got to train him was that first week, and I was probably as nervous as I've ever been to train somebody. Aubrey said, "Hey, kick his ass or he won't respect you." So I proceeded I proceeded to kick that ass, right? And so it was an awesome experience. And then I remember he had been kind enough to say something on his podcast shortly thereafter, and he had texted me before, the nearly identical statement. He's like, "Man, John, this is Joe Rogan. My ass is sore in the weirdest way." And I was like, "Well, And then he said something to that effect on the podcast, and I was like, well, what a freaking awesome reputation I have. You hang out with the wolf and you wake up the next door with your ass sore in ways that you've never experienced in your life. I don't know if that's a good time or a bad time, but it reminds me of an old joke, you know. In any case, um, now as he's moved to Austin, and I'm able to hang with them when he has the time and energy to pour into showing up here, because he has an awesome home gym and he's always active. But the dude's, you know, you hear like the hardest working man in show business or whatever, and you know, it could be Kevin Hart. I think Joe Rogan's right up there, man. He is mission driven. He is doing more things in his career than most of us could imagine. And he continues to show up. When he does show up here, I'm more in the mode of balancing an ass kicking with being here just to be of service to him, you know, and because I have that much respect for what he's done for others. And also, man, I wouldn't be here, and Onnit wouldn't be here if it wasn't for what he's done in goodwill to manifest the opportunities within Onnit. So I'd like to say, you know, it's just we just beast out all the time, but I'm in the combination of pulling in every resource. If Joe has his shoulder bothering him, I'm going to drag him over to the PT. We're going to get him taken care of, and then we're going to proceed to do a lot of hard kettlebell work. You know what? The nice thing is he loves kettlebells. I love kettlebells. It's not too hard to have a lot of fun. A lot of times it's he goes and I go to keep us accountable. I know Joe likes that vibe of shared you know, like embracing the suck together, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of that, you know. um, and we have fun, you know, like I try to make sure if I throw things at him that are outside his norm, that I'm willing to dive in deep and suck wind right next to him on things that he is familiar with. And it's fun that way. With Joe, I just really want to foster that type of trust and respect. It's a little atypical from other training sessions in that way for me.
Yeah, it just seems like a lot of people that come in to the gym that might have like a name for themselves. In many cases, you might be worried not to hurt them or make them like throw up or it be too hard, or they might not come back. With him, you got to worry that like you better make sure that this workout is tough so he respects you and knows that you know what you're doing, because he's so in that space. This is like a huge passion of his. And I respect the heck out of Joe Rogan. I mean, if people were to ask me like who are a few people you'd love to have dinner with if I had ever had the opportunity, like, you know, he would definitely be at that table. And he just seems like a complete beast in the gym, but he also seems pretty smart with his body and how he takes care of himself. So I definitely wanted to make sure that we touched on that. I want to go back a little bit to the beginning of our conversation where we were talking about the power of fitness, like being that catalyst for change when somebody's feeling down and out. And we were talking about this like in the pregame, if you will, about when somebody is mentally and emotionally unstable, it's hard for them to keep even keel because they have so much going on. We talked about the power of fitness. So why do you think that fitness is so important for people when they're going through such hard times in their life?
I think it's the most, you know, what we feel, what we think, um, whether or not we can control those things, especially in times of great turbulence, it, it's it's all in a very subjective realm, right? Like I only know how I'm feeling unless I express it, and I only know what I'm thinking unless I express it. And unfortunately, the ability to control those things, to will how I feel and how I think, is beyond our capacity most of the time, much less at those times of greatest need. But but being able to will myself to do one squat or one push up, and that become two to 10 or 100 within a workout, and building a sense of competence, and through competence confidence, being able to see and measure like outcomes that are objective. You know, I think that once you have overcome a couple of these and they don't have to be huge hurdles. Ideally, a good coach is going to set you up for early success, create a lot of momentum and buy-in so that every time, and Doug, you'll probably relate to this, I have to have a sense of what meets your current ability, just beyond it, but because of the trust and respect you have for me, that you'll step right out of that shell and meet a, a goal just outside of your belief of self, because you know I'm only going to put you in a position where you can succeed. And if I don't, then I'm presenting a goal within reason of your tolerance for short-term failure, because I won't set you up for long-term failure. But I think coaches have to be willing to foster an environment of like trust, respect, a sacred space where everything and anything can happen between you and I, because that's really what we have to do, right? To allow someone to transcend, and then introduce plan failures at a rate that that person can tolerate and overcome, because uh, then and only then can they really apply that to when they sense that they failed in other aspects of managing themselves. And I think that's what the power of fitness can do. And if you have somebody to help facilitate that experience for you, with you, actually is very collaborative. Man, it is the gateway to so much improvement in all aspects of self in a very short period of time.
Right. Yeah, and you mentioned just making sure that, as a coach, we have the clients like best interests, I guess, if you will, in mind, and making sure that they're not too overwhelmed with what it is you're going to have them do. Because I think in our industry specifically, there's a lot of people that maybe haven't gone through these deep health transformations like somebody like yourself or me or many others are in this space have. And there's people that maybe they just became a trainer out of college because they just decided they didn't want to be an athlete anymore. They just always had been in shape and into lifting, and they went that route where it's really hard, I think, to understand a client who's down and out because of their inability to do a push-up, or because they've always been that husky person their whole life, and they can't see the light in front of them. And I can go on and on with the examples. And I think it's so important to really, really like educate yourself, read, study, practice on how to really develop empathy for people, and talk to somebody at their level, and not trying to talk to them from your level, because you see it all the time in the industry where trainers are giving their clients their workout routines.
Mhm.
You're seeing people who are massively overweight and haven't worked out in 20 years, that you're seeing trainers giving them like barbell deadlifts and barbell squats because that's what they do. And it's just, that's not what works for everybody, and let alone a client who hasn't exercised in 20 years and probably has all kinds of emotional injuries, mental injuries, physical injuries, that they can't like see that. So what advice do you have, maybe not specifically for a trainer, but let's talk about the person that maybe they don't have access to a trainer, to know that whatever fitness program they're starting or they're doing is one that's going to be consistent for them. Like how can they know that, okay, I'm progressing at the right pace, this works within what I'm trying to achieve and my own abilities and stuff.
Yeah, there is a balancing act here, right?
Yeah.
And I think ultimately, we, even within our fitness system, we have an element of choose your own adventure. And,
Mhm.
and that might be, from the outside looking in, very superficial, in the sense that like we have a common framework. That common framework is meant to uh, use movement as a dialogue, a tool to have a better dialogue with yourself. I would really implore more people to prioritize that, to look at physical activity and and as a kind of a gift, right? Like it's something to appreciate what you can do, no matter how little it is. And then a coach that helps you see that it's okay where you're at, doesn't mean you should stay there,
Right.
but it's okay to be where you're at, because we can't change that until we go through this process. And that process has to be about celebrating what you develop the ability to do, ideally pain free. And in our system, what we prioritize are those things that end up becoming the greatest limitations in our ability to endure. So we are a longevity and performance system. Yes, we focus on in eking out as much performance as possible, but if you are battling recurring injuries, guess what you're not doing? You're not progressing. You're not performing, because you cannot, you don't, uh, people who perpetually injure themselves, they get to a certain point and they keep on attaching value to that point, but they're halfway there and then they try to revisit something they're ill prepared to do. So we want to continue to perpetually address your joint health, soft tissue health, ligament, tendon health, the health of the system as a whole, and perpetually create an opportunity for you to move in more dynamic and expressive ways, whether that's with out a tool, with a barbell, with a kettlebell, with a club, with a mace, with a medicine ball. And it's a common framework, right? For you to kind of live and play in this vehicle that is your body. It really is you, but we can see it as a vehicle, right? And we should be able to adapt and create like new solutions to problems we bump up against in our world. There are movement problems. Can we get down on the ground? Can we get up? Can we do it in different ways? Can we play and enjoy that process? And me, I have kids. It's really a function of, can I do that in a way where I'm engaging my 2-year-old? Man, what about when I have grandkids? I want to be able to do that then. My question is what I'm doing for fitness providing me the ability that I'm likely going to be able to do that when I have grandchildren? So I'm 43, just recently turned 43, and I have a 2-year-old. So it might be a long time before I'm a grandchild and have the ability to be on the ground with them in that way. I have a long time to make sure I'm planning for that to be a possibility, and much less a reality.
Yeah. No, and I like what you said about adventure and just having people, kind of having fun and being like injury free, if you will, and making sure that their only metric of success in the health and fitness space isn't necessarily just performance or weight loss or muscle growth. It's like, how are you feeling in your body? Like, how are you moving? Are you able to do like certain exercises without pain? Right? There's a lot of people that are trying to barbell bench, but maybe they can't even do a push-up. Right? There's people that are going and trying to add like weight to a squat, and they can't even do a body weight squat without pain or getting full range of motion. And I think it's so important to just master the basics and the fundamentals before progressing up into something more specific, and just trying to keep pushing through and pushing through and pushing through, because you see other people doing it. So I love how you kind of touched on that. So I got two more things I want to ask you really quick. And the first one is so like what you seem to be on the forefront and somebody that kind of sees things before they happen in the fitness space. You talked about how you were an early adapter of things like the club and maces and even a lot of the stuff that you've been doing it on it. Like, what is something that in more recent times that's maybe more unconventional that you've discovered for your own health and fitness that's helped you that you could share with the audience?
For me personally, wow. It's just constantly an evolution of the practices that like maybe I helped bring to light. Now I have what we are as very different than what I told you before, where I was part of an organization and you towed the company line. And then if you did something disparate or stretched the belief system a little bit, it was like you did too much. You're shining too bright, or whatever the case is, right? I can't speak for what motivation there was for those people who wanted to rule those organizations. But within ours, what we really wanted to do is create a environment where the vision was we create a safe haven, like a place where all our ships can dock and get replenished. And because we have core beliefs, we share meals, we share ideas, and then we all venture out into the great unknown, right? And then we come back with the findings of those adventures. I was just in the gym hanging out with Leo Savage. I don't know if you know who Leo Urquidez
Mhm.
is. He heads up a derivative of our education system, something that's evolved as a result of us teaching him the mace and him having a mace practice or sledgehammer practice even before then, moving them in ways that he was inspired through martial art. And what we do is we amalgamate people's previous existing histories and artistic expressions and with our framework and empower them to create something that is an evolution of what our foundational education system is. And for me, what it is for me, I'm a constant perpetual student, and I love being part of these people's story and empowering them so that I can be my cup can continue to be filled and find inspiration and like perspective that I wouldn't otherwise never have. To me, that's really a kind of a perpetual reality, right? And not only within our education system. I just signed up for OPEX's CCP course because I wanted it was more aligned like a college course. I haven't taken a college type of course for a long time, and I like what they have to offer. From what I understand, I'd love to bridge the gap between their framework and belief system and ours because I think we have a lot of common beliefs, but the way we outwardly express them is different and disparate. I just wanted an opportunity to bridge that gap. So
So what's OPEX?
OPEX, oh, I'm sorry. OPEX is a James Fitzgerald. He was one of the earlier CrossFit Games winners.
Mm.
And what he's done is he's really created a model for improving the profession of coaching in a one-to-one setting, whether it's virtual or hybrid or in person. And it's very aligned with a lot of what we're doing, but we do it in different ways, right? And so for me, the thing that's most enriching on a personal level is continuing to expose myself to these evolutions of our education and people that are on parallel paths that maybe see things differently and create an opportunity to continue having um, greater perspective, right? A synthesis of different beliefs.
There's so much that you said there, and I think what I really liked is how open the dialogue is with you and the team at Onnit to be able to just kind of explore different modalities, different alternatives of the health and fitness space, and see how it all can align with the brand, without like fear of judgment or being fired or whatever that is. And I think it's a really awesome thing that you have. And there is so many unconventional, like newer things that are coming to life now in the health and fitness space, right? We got breath work that's highly popular right now, hot and cold therapy, saunas, like different forms of all that stuff. Has there been any of those things that you personally is like a favorite of yours that you're like, you know what, I think this has staying power?
Yeah, all of them,
Mm,
right?
good.
So
Yeah.
um like you said, we're constantly seeking and having friends that are educators. So when you're talking about a lot of those things, a friend of mine just put out a certification course called a physiologic flexibility, Dr. Mike T. Nelson. And what he basically provides an education. So this is what I really love. What he does is provides an education of why these different modalities that you talked about, breath work, uh, hot and cold therapies, right? So so breath work, you can control the amount of oxygen or CO2 that you're processing, and altering those ratios has a huge impact on your physiological response. Same thing with hot and cold. Can your body regulate its narrow window of optimal you know temperature? These are what he would call homeostatic regulators, right? And so if those things go out of whack, it becomes really, really bad really fast for our body. And introducing these therapies that seem out there for some people, when you realize what you're really doing is stressing these these regulators, right? Stressing your body to regulate itself in these different aspects. Then what you're doing is you're amplifying the impact. It's like advanced recovery. Like how much can your body, how big of a window can your body adapt to? And so man, you know, until he had explained those things to me, as simple as he makes those concepts and brings in a lot of science, like I attributed a lot of value to them already because of my personal experience, but empowered with that education, I'm like, oh, duh, this makes perfect sense. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, man, my favorite for breath work to introduce people to is actually not just breath work, but using breath as a tool to further integrate your structure with alignment and a biasing lines of tension, is a body of work called Foundation Training by Dr. Eric Goodman. Freaking phenomenal. So, especially since I'm a strength coach and strength athlete, aligning the the breath in a way that it amplifies those other goals, that amplifies the outcomes with the other goals, um, is a great entry point into that, and it's very practical, right? So then from there you can get into all the other breath work, because that'll do is expand your ability to breathe 360, expand your body's ability to breathe as a form of decompression, and which kind of sets you up for greater success in all the other breath practices.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, all that stuff is so important, and it can definitely work wonders on your health and fitness if you're consistent with it and you kind of go at your own pace. Cause I think, just like anything else with all that stuff, you just want to make sure that you're progressing at a state that's maintainable and just kind of aligned with your ability to do with your ability to do so. So last question I have is like, what are you excited about? Like, what is Coach John Wolf excited about? But before you answer that, like, where can people find out more about you, what you're doing at Onnit, if people want to check that out?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so for me, the best place to connect with me, even though I haven't been as active on the social scene, is Instagram slash Coach John Wolf. Really easy, right? But where I have been active, but it isn't as public facing, is on it tribe private Facebook group, and that's where we facilitate a lot of the like I provide a lot of free coaching for people that are going through our digital home fitness products at On It, or On It 6 programs, which kind of let you choose your own adventure with which methodology or tool you want to play with: clubs, maces, body weight, durability, which is kind of like a loaded restorative program, steel maces, barbells, whatever the case is. And then we have our On It in 30 products that are um, that feature me and some of the other coaches here, that are how you get on it in 30 minutes or less, right? And they have like different themes. But ultimately, I spent a lot of time coaching in the way that we've kind of had these discussions, these kind of the softer approach, because they work out hard, but they need the psychological and mental support to celebrate their successes, and we provide a lot of support in that group. So that's why I don't I pour a lot of energy there in there. um and so Instagram, Coach John Wolf. And then if you'd like to check out the group On It Tribe on Facebook. And so outside of that, onit.com, and any of our fitness products and offerings, primarily the digital side, you'll see this face and hear this voice, and all the positive reinforcement in the coaching. Receiving my coaching is there, along with a lot of corny dad jokes. Now, in terms of what I'm excited about, man, realistically, it's been um, a long time that I've been part of On It, and On It's growth. I think as an organization, we've grown through, you know, kind of our infancy into our adolescence, and now I think we're finally hitting that phase of real growth potential, where we know who we are. We work as a unit. When we were designed, our teams were like, Aubrey had even said, like, he wanted a pressure cooker. There's all this talent and all these ideas, and the best ideas would win, but those best ideas would usually leave out some of, like fitness wasn't necessarily a core driver of revenue. So I had to be really scrappy with how we did things. But now fitness is part of the overarching mission, is part of what we call our ecosystem, where we support our On It customers, and being integrated more deeply and aligned with our mission moving forward. I'm so excited about how many people we could touch with this within this ecosystem, providing, support on the mental emotional side, providing support with the physical transformations, the fitness products, providing support with meaningful, products that make it easy for people to optimize themselves on the supplements and functional food side, and just hopefully, um, hopefully doing what we've been doing, but at a scale we've never done before. And that's a big part of why we were willing to kind of allow ourselves to be acquired by a big monster in the industry who wanted to weaponize the resources that they could make available to us to fulfill our mission. And that's been really, at least up till now, the conversation that's continued had. You always hear all of these horror stories of being bought by bigger companies, but it was one of the things that was really great in one of the meetings with Unilever. They're like, I want you guys to imagine that Onnit bought Unilever, and what would that mean in terms of how you would weaponize all of the resources we have. And to me, I'm a mission driven guy. I'm here to help people, as you said, support them empathetically through whatever it is that they're suffering through, their own inner dialogue, whether it's a chemical addiction like what you and I have overcome, whether it's just a negative reinforcement process they're constantly in, whether it's been abuse and that scarred them. I think on it's a platform that can serve so many people because we have so many ways of making this process available to them. And I don't know if you could tell, but you asked me that. I really feel like I'm not the only one here that feels that way, though. And there's everybody is here for a purpose. It's a really, uh, it's a really exciting time.
Yeah, I could tell you're definitely on it, and you light up when you talk about it, and it's really inspiring, like what you've overcome in your own journey, and what you and Aubrey in the team at On It have been able to accomplish and achieve with everything. And you mentioned being bought by Unilever, and kind of what that looks like in a way, and how cooperative they've been kind of in the transition, and making sure that you guys stay true to your brand and progressing in the most like mission driven, purposeful way. So John, this has been awesome. I will make sure to plug the links to On It, to your social channel, in the show notes. And for people listening to this, this is gonna be one of those episodes where I think you're gonna want to press the pause button a few times. Maybe it was something that John said in his story, maybe it was conversations that we had surrounding the importance of fitness, maybe it was goal setting, maybe it was what he talked about with On It. But what I encourage you to do is to take a screenshot, tag John, tag On It with a takeaway. Like, what was it? What was something that you learned? What was something that inspired you? Maybe it was an action you're going to take based on something you said, because we'd love to hear your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. And once again, thank you for listening to this episode of The Adversity Advantage. I'm your host, Doug Bopes, and we'll see you next time.